Hello and welcome, I am Scrapperlock, and this is Soloing the Stalker. We're working on a final story arc at level 39 for Colleen Nelson, but before we do, I want to check our email because Liquid Death from the comment section of my YouTube channel on January 21st sent us a bunch of emails and gave us, it looks like, all of the doctored wounds healing enhancements already created for us. These aren't recipes. These are enhancements. So this is really cool. And when we get ready to use the um, sets, we will go ahead and include that. So what I think I'm going to do is head to the base. I'm going to put the get out of the way. I'm going to put these um, in our HQ. I assume we'll be able to do that, and we'll just put them in our enhancement table. And then when the time comes, we will grab them. And we won't worry about doing preventive medicine or any of those others because we've already got this other set. We want to put this in sets. All right, so let's claim these. And I already did send him a thank you. So here we go, right? So this is an enhancement. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this one does not look like it has a level on it. So I think this is one of these that are attuned, right? So basically the level is always your level, like a regular ATO. And so that is really cool. So it doesn't matter what level you are when you put this in. Now, I'm not going to use it yet because part of my demonstration with this character is getting to the 40s without using any sets, because that was the challenge. The person who didn't agree with me about Stalkers being great soloers said, yes, but can you do this, what you're saying, without using these guys, right? Without using sets. So we want to show that, yes, we can, and we absolutely will do that. So thank you very much. Winterguard is the name of this person here on the game, but Liquid Death on the forum. Those of you who are watching, I know it's probably been a while, probably been weeks since Liquid Death made that comment. It was in episode, let me look at that. Episode 10 of season 2 about the AI and role playing. If you get a chance, go in there and just make a little post and say, hey, thanks for being nice and leaving Scrapper some extra sets so that I can demonstrate the sets and how they work to the audience. So thanks, that was really cool of you, and I do appreciate it. So definitely send some likes and some thumbs up Liquid Death's way. He or she certainly deserves that thank you. I do appreciate it, so thank you very much. And this is what I mean about, we don't have a big audience to this channel. It's only a few people who comment most days, but wow, I have like the best audience just in terms of everybody is really kind and friendly, and no flaming of each other at all. You guys are great, and it makes me want to keep doing the channel, right? I don't have to moderate it. Nobody really says anything rude or obnoxious or unpleasant or anything like that. I don't have to ask you guys to behave yourselves. You just do. It's so nice to have that in a channel. It's one of the reasons why I don't mind it's a small channel. Like I say, quality is greater than quantity. That's my motto. All right. So as we go, let's talk about a couple of things. So one of the things I want to talk about is apparently Dungeon Masterpiece, and I confess I did not watch the video. I watched a video about the video, and I only watched a few minutes of it because I got the gist, and I said, okay, I have enough that I can converse with you guys about the topic. So Dungeon Masterpiece put out a video sometime around the holidays, and this is Baron Derop, and he was talking about designing mission, designing adventures, designing dungeons, designing levels of dungeons, and that sort of thing. Are you guys gonna come here? Pain in the neck. You runners, I cannot wait until I have I-beams to shoot you with. Enhanced for accuracy. and probably damage. Um, so anyway, in this video, and I don't know the details of what elements of the level design Dungeon Masterpiece was praising. Apparently, there was a lot of discussion where he was talking about when you're trying to figure out how to design a map, like the map of this place here, right? How do you decide how many rooms to put in? How do you decide what to put in the rooms? How do you decide the route through the dungeon and that kind of thing? And apparently he used a lot of examples from this kind of thing, from video games like Legend of Zelda or probably Celasta or whatever. He used video game examples and urged, you know, potential GMs to think like a video game designer, the video game devs, and how they think about these things, and to use their techniques to improve their level design of their dungeons. And what this person who was critiquing that argued is, be careful, because tabletop role-playing games are not video games. He made two arguments, however. The first was that tabletop role-playing games aren't video games, and you can't necessarily play them the same way or run the dungeons the same way, and that is absolutely true, and we're going to talk about that. But then the second thing he talked about, he mentioned, was that he feels like one of the reasons that a lot of the modern role-playing games to him, so this is obviously like an old school grognard, are going off the rails and not really as good as they used to be, is that a lot of them are taking their cues from video games, and they're trying to kind of create the same reward structure of a video game in a tabletop game. So he's talking about how in modern role-playing games, every time you level up, you get stat bumps, skill bumps, etc., because players like that, right? You think that happens in City of Heroes, right? Every time we level up, we get enhancement slots or a new power. And what he argued is that that old role-playing games didn't used to be that way. I need to pause for just a sec. All right, I'm back. Still fighting the same guy because I had to answer the phone. You probably heard it ringing. It's a wrong number as usual. So what he was talking about is that, you know, in the old role-playing games, you think about like old school D&D, when fighters got more powerful, they got maybe a little bit better on the 2-hit charts, right? They might go from +0 to hit to +1 to hit to +2 to hit from between level 1 and 10, right? So they got a little better on the hit charts every few levels, and they gained some hit dice, some hit points. And that's it, right? But if you look at Dungeons and Dragons now, for instance, every couple levels, the fighter is going to get abilities, like the ability to do an action surge, or the ability to instantly heal a hit die or two of damage right there in combat, or something like that. Or they're going to gain the ability score increases every couple levels, every 3-4 levels, to gain more strength, more dexterity, whatever the player chooses. And so he was showing a chart of like a leveling up. I don't know if it was D&D or Pathfinder, and it was literally every level there was something that you were getting. You were getting a new skill up, you were getting a feat, you were getting an ability score increase, or some kind of a class ability. And these are constantly being added to the character. And I mean, I noticed that they were doing this in D&D. I didn't really think anything of it, because I think before D&D, you know, before the recent time I went into 5th edition D&D, I was playing mostly video games, and that's what video games do, so it didn't seem weird to me. But he argued, you know, in the old days, role-playing games didn't do this. If you think about Champions, you got actual PowerPoints with the character, but it was supposed to be very rare that you gained new powers. You could gain them under certain restricted circumstances. So, for example, if you had a multi-power, which allowed you to have a single pool of points that you could divide between several powers, and the multi-power had a particular theme to it, like let's say you're using your multi-power to create a bunch of different types of energy blast, a regular lightning bolt that does regular damage, some sort of a stun bolt that does no normal defense damage, and some sort of a shock bolt that does some kind of like neurological damage attack against ego defense versus limited defense, something like that. Um, and you say, well, now I want to do like a lightning flash that stuns people, and it does a flash and makes them um, makes them hard to see. A GM would probably let you add that because it's part of a pool of powers that it makes sense that you would have that extra power. But if you're just trying to create new powers for the character, that was actually supposed to be rare. I remember, and I had this big argument with my best friend about this. In the Champions, the old school, like first, second edition Champions rules, they were talking about what you could do with experience points. You could maybe learn a new skill. You could possibly buy some reduced endurance cost on your existing powers. You could possibly do stuff like add PowerPoints, and then it said, and or even with excellent justification, gain a new power, right? And what I argued to my best friend was that sounds like it should be rare, right? They said with excellent. Why can I not hit this guy? With excellent justification, you could maybe gain a new power, not whenever you have the points, right? You have to have the points, but you also had to justify everything you bought to the GM. And it was actually pretty unusual for you to gain new stuff. Disadvantages generally didn't get bought off unless there was a really good role-playing reason for it. Just need to find the book, right? So we don't actually have to kill everybody here. I'm going to ignore these guys for now. I hate the Spectres, so we're just going to ignore them and stalk the mission. Also, I don't want to level up because when we get to 40, we need to get to new contacts. So we don't want to level up too fast. But we'll get these guys because they're not ghosts, and I don't like the ghosts, but these are fine. So in Champions, you didn't gain new. Well, there weren't levels, but you didn't gain new powers every time you had the points for it, right? You could maybe up your stats a little bit, but you couldn't go from a 20 strength to a 70 strength without explaining to the GM why your character went from being able to lift a motorcycle to being able to lift a Boeing 747. There should be a reason for it. Did you have a radiation accident? Well, you don't have radiation accidents every day, right? And so the pattern, what he argued of the older pre-video game RPGs was that when you leveled up, you got a little more powerful, but you didn't necessarily get every time you leveled up a whole new skill, ability, feat, power, etc., etc. And so he argued that this sort of constant increasing of that kind of stuff as you level up, it makes a tabletop game very video gamey. So that's what he said. I already think kind of there's too much video gaminess to RPGs, and I don't disagree. I mean, I think that one of the things I've argued persistently, actually, with my best friend about in Foundry, is that he's constantly asking me to add mods to Foundry that are that make it like there's this one mod that makes it like Solasta, the video game, right? It gives you a UI that looks like the Solasta UI. Oh yeah, please let's add it. Let's add it. I added it. You could turn it off. I said to him, I'll add it if you can turn it off. We went in there, we figured out that the players could individually choose to turn it off. I said that's necessary, and I'm pretty sure everyone but him turned it off, right? And what I said is this makes it too video gamey, and he said, "Oh, you're being ridiculous. It doesn't." But the thing is, it's not that it doesn't. It's that he doesn't mind that it does, right? So it's fine for him. He actually, I guess, prefers it. I think he likes a lot of the, if you want to call it innovations or changes or new patterns that were introduced to RPGs by video games. He likes them, and so he doesn't mind it if the video game, if the TTRPG, the tabletop game, becomes more video game-ish. I, on the other hand, don't necessarily want it to be video game-ish, right? I kind of want it to be like a tabletop role-playing game, and so So anyway, that's what this guy was talking about. So then he then went into that and said, if you're coming from my position, his position, which is that role-playing games have already become too video gamey, he said, I don't necessarily think you should be trying to copy the designers of video games on dungeon levels and stuff for your D&D. And one of the things that, I don't know if he actually ended up talking about this, one of the things that's true of the video games, and after all, I'm guilty of really liking some of this with BioWare. By the way, bug, this shouldn't be floating. And that's the second or third one that's been floating. Oh, you came back? All right. That's fine. We wanted you to come back anyway. You can stay right there. I can do negative if you can do negative. There you go. When you play a game like Mass Effect, when you play a game like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, when you play a game like Dragon Age, when you play a game like, well, even Solasta, right? Although it's more gamey than those others that I mentioned. You got the voice acting, you got the character animations, you have the interactions with each NPC where you can romance them and stuff like this. They really make those games more like, almost like you're role-playing a movie. It's very cinematic, sure. It's very cool story, sure. But I remember saying, I could imagine if you get rid of a lot of the RPG game-ish stuff, you could take the cutscenes and some of the combat from something like Mass Effect and make a really cool movie out of it. I mentioned it to somebody and they were like, well, that'd be a 30-hour movie. I'm like, okay, well, you could make a TV show out of it, right? With 30 episodes that are an hour long each. And you could actually watch it. I mean, the voice acting is great. The character animations are good. It would literally be a watchable movie. But role-playing games traditionally haven't been anything like movies, right? It's very different. It's sort of like saying a game of chess should be like a movie. Like, it's not. It's a fundamentally different kind of an experience, and so I think his point is kind of well taken, that if you copy the video game model, right? He didn't say this, but I'll say it. You're actually copying the movie model, that the role-playing game should be like a novel or a movie. And if you go back, I think in one of my one of the videos I did where I was doing the power washing simulator, I said, it's not a novel and it's not a movie. It's a role-playing game. And it's a tabletop role-playing game. They're fundamentally different structurally. They have very different structure. And just like a play is going to have a different structure from a movie, because plays have intermissions and they don't have a 2-hour runtime, and they can't, and if you watch a movie that was made out of a play, or a play that follows a similar script to a movie, like for example, Inherit the Wind was a play. They turned it into a movie a couple of times. If you want to watch it, the one to watch is the one with Spencer Tracy and Fred March from the 1950s. It is brilliantly acted, and it's a really well done adaptation. But they made a bunch of changes in the movie from the play. The reason is that the movie had sets. The play, the movie had movie sets and was filmed over a period of weeks. The play has the sets that you get on the stage, right? And is done in a single evening. And so it has to be done differently. And so you're not going to get the exact same story structurally in a play that you do in a movie, even though they're very similar in terms of how you present them to the audience, right? They're way more similar than a role-playing game is to a movie. And yet there are still going to be differences. And so I think that's part of the problem. I think that, not to knock on the Let's Plays, right, the actual plays of things like, with Critical Role, Wildcards, ETU, stuff like that. I loved watching Wildcards. And although I stopped watching Critical Role after 50 or 60 episodes, the first 20 or season 2, the first 20 or 30 episodes I really enjoyed, and then I just kind of got sick of it. Um, I'm not knocking them, and I don't think they shouldn't do it. Or they're not problematic, I think, in and of themselves. But because it's a bunch of actors sitting around trying to present the game they're playing as an episodic entertainment, as episodic form of entertainment to an audience, they're going to play the game in a fundamentally different way from somebody who is from a group that is just playing it as a game. Right? I've said this before. If I recorded using OBS or something, recorded my Deadlands group playing Deadlands and posted it, everyone would be bored out of their minds. Your brain would melt. It would not be enjoyable to watch because we get into very technical game discussions. We like that. And we do a lot of map stuff, and we use the interface a lot, and we do a lot of third-person summary of, okay, your character finds this out with it, instead of acting it out, right? And it wouldn't be interesting, but it's much more the way people used to play role-playing games than the shows where they're acting out every word line of dialogue because they're performing it for an audience that wants to see that, and they're professional actors or amateur actors, people who were drama majors in college, stuff like that, which is the Wildcards group. So they're going to do it that way when regular people who play RPGs are just, soccer moms and, people who work physical plant during the day, or scientists during the day, or whatever you happen to be, and they're just playing the role-playing game for fun, right? It's going to be a fundamentally different kind of a structure. And so I think that there is something to be learned from the way video game designers build levels, but you don't necessarily want to clone the structure. So if we think about City of Heroes, right? I once said if I ran a Champions game, what I would probably do is set it in Paragon City, use these villains, and use some of the story arc ideas and run them. But I absolutely would not run a scenario in City of Heroes like this mission. Or not in Champions, like this mission in City of Heroes. Right? I wouldn't do this in Champions. Why? Because this mission with this ridiculous map where you're dungeon crawling would take weeks to play in Champions. You can't do a battle like this. Imagine if we had a group, it wouldn't just be 2 guys, right? If we had a group of 5 in here, which would be your Champions group, there would be 17 or 18 enemies in here, right? Including a couple lieutenants and a boss. The battle would take a couple minutes in City of Heroes. That battle in Champions would take 2 sessions. Just that battle alone. And now you have to do it 12 or 15 times in this mission. No. You wouldn't do that in Champions. In Champions, there would be an old broken down office building. I would have one map, one room that's just like this area right here. And the victim would be hidden back here, and the villains would be up here, and there'd be one battle. And that would be the end of it. Because you couldn't run it this way. So although I might be able to draw inspiration from the map of Paragon City for the map of the city we play on, in terms of where the base is and where the police headquarters is, they wouldn't be doing street hunts. They wouldn't be doing defeat 20 enemies, right? And all of that kind of stuff that comes out of the COH model, you would not use in Champions. It would be completely absurd. So you just wouldn't be able to do it. So you could use their ideas. You could be inspired by things like Chaldeans. You could be inspired by things like the Fifth Column and make a story like that. You could be inspired by this Path of the Dark and or Banished Pantheon. I've talked about maybe running a Call of Cthulhu or a Savage Worlds Horror Companion game or East Texas University and somehow building the Banished Pantheon into it. Yes, as inspiration for NPCs and a cult and a plot, sure. But I wouldn't copy the mission maps because it would take months to do a single mission, let alone an entire story arc. I wouldn't copy the story arcs verbatim because the story arcs give you, the player, zero agency. All I can do here is succeed at this mission and advance to the next chapter of the story arc, or fail at it and play it again until I succeed at it. Right? So that model doesn't work in tabletop. So yeah, I could have Vampyri and Fifth Column, and they could be trying to follow the path of the dark and summon some sort of a dark force, or maybe the Envoy of Shadows could be a really powerful villain that they would fight. Sure, but but they wouldn't be going through a mission, a scenario, and keep fighting these unnamed boss villains like Mark II Zenith over and over again on one mission map to do one mission. That's just absurd. You would not do that in Champions. It would take too long. It would be boring and repetitive, right? Remember, City of Heroes is a video game. It was an MMO. It was a subscription service. When you're creating a subscription service, you're purposely trying to keep people grinding for a long time that takes forever so that they can keep paying you so that you make money, right? A game master is not running a subscription service, I assume. We're not talking about Start Playing Games or one of those, but you're generally not running a subscription service. You're not trying to drag it out. You don't have paying customers. You're just playing with your friends, right? And as a result, if you are trying to follow a subscription model, right, it's not going to work because it's structurally different from how you would play with friends, right, in a tabletop game. So you could not use City of Heroes. You should not use City of Heroes level design, mission design, map design to design scenario maps for Champions. That is not a good idea. Right? And I think similarly, if you, like for instance, let me give you a great example, Solasta, which is supposed to be, a player-made adaptation of 3rd edition D&D, and in combat, it generally follows the rules of 5th edition D&D to the extent that they could, following the SRD, right, the system resource document. But many of the maps in Solasta, in fact, there were so many of them that I got kind of sick of it and stopped playing the game. I did the whole first campaign. I started the second campaign. They did this even more, and I was like, I'm kind of sick of this. What was I sick of? Well, I was sick of the fact that all of their maps had these a lot of vertical relief and 3D structure, and you had to climb up and down things to get to the right place and figure out where your characters were going to be. I mean, I understand their purpose. They were trying to make a little puzzle. It was almost like a platform game within D&D where you had to maneuver your characters around the areas that were walkable and climbable to get into the advantageous position to take shots at your enemy or punch or whatever. Those maps would be impossible to run in an actual tabletop because unless you have 3D dioramas, which almost nobody does because they're expensive, if you're just drawing maps on a whiteboard in front of your players, right, or doing theater of the mind, you wouldn't be able to keep track of all of those positions and the verticality, right? You would lose that. I mean, it was hard to keep track of some of that in Champions, but all you were doing was climbing altitude with your character with flight, right? We weren't using the terrain and have terrains that's different levels, and then you push a stone over and now you can climb on top of it to climb up to something else. That's all like computer game puzzle stuff. It was fun, but it's not the sort of thing that you would generally do in a tabletop game. And doing it incessantly, like on every single map, would probably be impossible or so difficult and complicated that you wouldn't keep doing it, right? So this is a game that was designed to model 5th edition D&D, and even that game has stuff in it that you probably wouldn't do on pencil and paper, right? And now if you take a game like Mass Effect and you try to convert what that game's storyline and the battles and the mission maps and stuff are like to pencil and paper, again, it's going to be almost impossible. You don't have waypoints and stuff like that. I mean, it's just functionally it's so different that I think this person who was critiquing it is correct that you have to be very careful not to. Um, wow, this is cool right here. You have to be very careful not to over adopt the video game patterns in your role playing game at the table. We can actually see some of this in wargaming, right? So you think about like, oh, design your scenario maps like uh, computer strategy games, right? Build a world map like Europa Universalis 5. Well, I mean, EU was originally a board game that they turned into a computer game, but the board game wasn't anywhere near as complex as EU5 now is, right? You wouldn't be able to model that on a computer, right? There actually is a game. Oh, what is it called? I was looking at it, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I want to get this game. I can't remember what it's called, but um, it's not Vive la Emperor. That's a different one. That looks pretty cool. But it's basically you model. It goes from the 1850s to the 1920s. You model the six great powers of the world: Britain, France, the Ottoman Empire, etc. You pick one, and other. It's playable with up to 6 people, so it's sort of like the old Civilization board game. But what I love about it, and this is one of the reasons I think I want to pick it up at some point, although it's very expensive, and I don't think I want to do it right away because it's complex, and I want to try something a little easier. Um, the for they You can have up to 6 players, but if you have fewer, they have what they call a bot, basically a set of roll tables and flowcharts of decision trees and roll tables for all of the empires. So you can use the bot for any country that hasn't been taken. So if it's you and your best friend, there's just 2 of you, you can use 4 bots. And you still have all 6 countries in play. You're just randomly rolling to see what 4 of the 6 countries do, and then you make your own decisions. I really like this, and it seems like it's probably a lot of fun because it's like a computer game where you can play with 1 to 6 players, and then the computer takes over the rest. The bots are obviously going to have to be much simpler than a computer opponent, right? Because you can't have as many instructions in a couple of roll tables in a booklet as you could cram into the code of a video game. They have some things that are really similar. So, for instance, I know EU4 better than EU5. They have something that seems like national ideas from EU5, where each nation gets a certain set of national ideas that sort of reflect the technologies and the culture of that nation in history. And so you draw cards from a bunch of national ideas, and you draw cards for a national goal. I guess if it's random, and maybe you get to choose them if you're the player. And so each game is different because each time you play, each country is going to have a different set of national ideas and that kind of thing. So this is very similar to EU4, but EU4 you could have, like a dozen of these. You can only have 3 in the board game, right? And 1 goal, I think, right? So it's much more limited. What you can do on a computer and what you can do in pencil and paper are not the same thing. And so you just have to, when you're designing it, it's okay to take some inspiration, but you really have to be careful not to try and be to cleave too closely to the video game idea, because you're not playing a video game when you're doing tabletop. And so I think that's actually a really good point. And I mean, again, I think you see the same thing in something like strategy games, right? The games that you can play on a board have a different feel to them and are going to be done differently from the games that you can play on computer. Um, I've been playing this SGS Pacific D-Day, which is, these large battles like invading Iwo Jima and stuff. And there is a solo board game of invading Iwo Jima, but that game only covers like the beaches and the first few days of that fight. Right? It doesn't cover the entire island because to do that would be almost impossible on that scale. You would have to use a higher scale instead of using like companies and stuff. You'd have to use divisions. Or for example, Advanced Squad Leader, which is a tactical simulator. Oh yeah, they've got the Battle of Iwo Jima in there, but it's not the whole battle. It's just this hill and the 2 or 3 squads that try to take that hill from a couple of Japanese squads, right? Because that's the scale that Advanced Squad Leader can run. It can't run the scale of a division. To do that, you'd need 1,000 squads between the two sides, and you wouldn't be able to run the game. It would take you 100 years. And so you can't necessarily learn from, the board game Squad Leader how to design real-time simulation like Company of Heroes, which is operating at about the same level, but it's an RTS. And it's not going to play the way a tabletop board game, turn-based game would. And you couldn't do an RTS in tabletop. It's not possible. You can't do continuous stuff because as a human, you have to stop and change what you're doing and write stuff down, right? And so you can't mimic a real-time simulation, which means that you can't use the map from a real-time simulation to do a tabletop simulation or to turn-based simulation because the features wouldn't fit for that type of a game, right? And so I think that this guy who was criticizing Dungeon Masterpiece was correct to point out that you have to be careful with this. Now that said, I think there are definitely things you can learn from the designers of dungeons and missions and stuff in video games, right? Both good and bad. You can see things that you feel like aren't well designed and avoid those, and see things that are well designed and maybe try to incorporate some of them into your tabletop game, but always keep in mind that this is something that that was a computer game, and we may need to tweak it and not use it wholesale because, after all, we're playing a tabletop game and not a computer game, and we're going to have to take that into account. I am having some real endurance problems with this focused accuracy. So we're going to need to reduce that endurance even more, I guess. Haven't found Bentley Berkeley yet. I bet he's going to be like in the corner or something, or downstairs. So I guess for the +2s, I should probably take the focus accuracy off. I've just been kind of leaving it on because up until now it hasn't been killing my endurance that badly. But we've been having some issues with it now, so we'll leave it off for now. Put it on when I need it. If I'm missing too much, I'll turn it back on. Okay, so it doesn't look like he's down here, so let's move up. The other thing I've always got to remember to do is look in these little sort of crevices, because a lot of times the captive is back there. Where is that? Upstairs, maybe? We can go upstairs. I don't think the hostages are usually upstairs, but maybe. Oh, there's a boss. Definitely want to take him out. Interior defense robot. Okay. And that takes the boss out. Those guys are kind of pushovers. The council slash fifth column bots. Still don't see Bentley Berkeley. Well, so guys, I do want to mention, I mean, if you're seeing this, it's probably 3 weeks to a month after this happened, so I guess everything worked out okay. But right now, in my part of the country, we're battening down for, in a couple days, we're supposed to get a pretty horrifying ice, sleet, snowstorm. And of course, the news always likes to hype it up as being super horrible. And I really wish that the news folks would have read and understood the story of the boy who cried wolf, right? Because they cry wolf all the time, and you never know when it's actually dangerous and when they're just hyping it up to get clicks and views. The Simpsons mocked this years ago, before there were clicks and views, and they were just trying to get people to watch for TV ratings, right? But they had Kent Brockman and the weatherman talking about the supposedly monster storm that was coming, and it was a killer storm, and Kent Brockman gets in front of the board, like the death board, where they were going to be tracking how many deaths there were from the storm, and he says, how many deaths have there been so far? How am I going to get out of here? How do I get in here? He said, how many deaths have there been so far? And the guy went to the leaderboard and he said, so far there's a grand total of, and the leaderboard went and showed 0. But it's sure to get worse. And Kent Brockman said, oh my gosh, how horrifying. Right? So it's horrifying. Yeah. So, there's always the question in my mind, are they doing that, or is it real? Now, this one actually seems like it's real, based on the various models. Although, as close as we are to it, because today's Thursday and it's supposed to hit my area, well, originally they said Saturday morning, then they said Saturday around lunch, then they said Saturday afternoon, now they're kind of saying Saturday early evening, like 6 p.m., so I don't know exactly when it's going to hit, but it's looking like it might be bad. But did I miss anything? Excuse me. Maybe here. I have the feeling he's got to be over here, and yeah, didn't miss anything. I knew he's almost always hiding here somewhere. Anyway, it's supposed to be pretty bad in my area. Hopefully, it'll bypass us. I know at one point earlier in the day, the local forecast, which has been a little less alarmist than some of the national stuff that I've seen, the local person said it's like they had originally said we were going to get 18 inches, and then they revised it down, and then now they're saying it's more going to be icing, which is sometimes worse. But what she said was it's been drifting north, right? And if it drifts north far enough, we may just get rain, right? And so I'm hoping for rain and a little bit of sleet, maybe a tenth of an inch of ice or something, but not something bad enough to wipe out the entire power grid for half the state, which is what sometimes happens with these things. My area is notoriously bad, and I always try to figure out, am I going to be, without power? And the main problem with that, of course, is that then you don't have any heat. at least for me, my hot water heater is gas. So I can get hot water even when there's a power outage. So I can at least run hot water over my hands and stuff like that, and I can do that kind of thing, or create a hot water bottle or something like that with the hot water from the tap. And it also means that I can leave the tap running a little bit, and hopefully my pipes won't freeze. But if it gets cold enough in the house, I don't know what happens. Oh, we're being ambushed. You're an idiot. You're ambushing me by the police drone. You're just going to get killed. Aren't you? Isn't the police drone going to kill him? Oh no, he's not coming to me. That's really interesting. It's almost like he realizes there's a police drone there. Maybe he does. None of the other villains usually do. You're okay, buddy. Construction guy. Yeah, so hopefully, well, let's put it this way. If you see this posted, because I will not have posted it before the snowstorm comes, it means that everything's okay and we're back in business. Hopefully it won't be one of these things, that just awful things that sometimes large chunks of people get chopped in, stuck into, where they're without power for a week and a half or something. Happened in Texas one year. It happened in my state after a hurricane in the western part of the state. And those guys might get hit again. Some people are saying, let's hope they don't get hit again, because they're still recovering from the hurricane. But, the weather is the weather. Not much we can do about it. So anyway, if you're seeing this, then it probably means that everything's back to normal, that I've got power and I'm posting stuff. I'm a couple of days ahead. Like when you see something, I probably have 2 or 3 more posts scheduled at that point, but I'm not that far ahead. So anyway, that I think is where we will leave it. We're pretty close to level 40. We probably will hit that in the next episode. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes, soloing the Stalker.